And why don't we have a roll call just for the record? Since it's being recorded.
Okay, I'll go. Okay, good. Thanks. Yeah, bye-bye.
Anita, put yourself on mute, please.
We don't have a host in the meeting. The host should be able to mute for her. Got it.
Oh, she got it.
Excellent.
Just have to keep repeating it. So Ann Rarick is here.
Paul McComb.
I'm not on.
Bob Cicchetti.
Ruth Lauer.
And we're missing Bruce.
No, Bruce is here.
I'm on the telephone because it's not working.
No, you're there.
Okay. All right. Welcome. So we can't approve the minutes because we don't have them as part of the package we got. And I would like your final approval on the questions that are that I proposed to the personnel board. I have 2 out of the 3 people that I am going to meet with. I've got dates and times and locations. So I'm moving forward, and this is all happening before the end of the year. I sent a letter explaining exactly what the process was going to be and how that it was going to be a summary that I will bring to you, as well as review with them before bringing to the task force. So we move on to other member updates. Another update is that Ruth and I are meeting with the past chair of the personnel board tomorrow, Ellen Quackenbush. She's got several things on the personnel board's website that she had done some research on. And we want to ask her some follow-up questions to that. Ruth, do you want to add anything?
No, I'm looking forward to that meeting. I think the information that I can glean from the personnel board website is very meaty. There's a lot of work that she's done.
Yeah. And she's also informed us about some conversations she had with the Collins Center at UMass. And I don't know whether it was her or somebody else was talking about the Doherty Center, both of which are public policy groups that lend themselves out to other organizations, other municipalities, and do research and consultations. I also attended the personnel board and researched over 44 personnel boards across Massachusetts. And I've also, I attended most of the select board meeting, but not all of it, but enough to hear the discussion about questions that they had, but no vote was taken. So we'll hold that for a while. What are other people's updates about what they're doing?
I guess I can
Carmen.
jump in if you
Okay, Paul, and then Claude.
just briefly going back to a couple of meetings ago when I was asked about the questions that had been sent to HR. An update to that is I haven't received any reply other than Amy wanted to meet with us, but I'm still waiting for the data. And I have another couple of avenues that I've taken to try to obtain data. That'll be helpful for the task force going forward. I've received 1 round, and I'm waiting for a second. And with respect to the questions that the task force had that were sent to HR, it's been a month since we asked, and have no reply. with the data, for the answers to the question. I'm feeling the only recourse I have at this point is to make it a public records request and put it on a timeline under the law. I'm out of options, and I throw it out to the board.
Could I jump in? I wonder if we should reference the letter that Susan sent to our task force, and also the discussion at the meeting of the select board. I wasn't at the meeting, but I listened and watched the video recording. And I think that's very relevant because Susan, in her letter, which is, I assume it's public record, it went to the heads of the committee. I'm not sure where it was posted, but it basically expressed a little bit of caution about members of a task force or any committee, because there are some 65 committees, sending out requests for data. And she suggested a longstanding policy of the chairs of committees taking any such requests through the town manager. And since that comes from a sitting select board member, I think that would be a better approach rather than a public records request, which seems fairly confrontational.
I just want to jump in and say I'm the only reason I'm suggesting that, Claude, is I'm stuck.
Yeah,
So,
and we understand, but it's not just a data request, it's a policy issue and a procedures issue. What Susan suggested quite reasonably is that there are some 65 committees of the town, and policy is that such requests get vetted through the chairs of a committee, through the town manager, and then the town manager looks at the best way to get the data. As important as that data may be to us, the town may have other priorities in terms of, answering questions. I don't know any of the issues involved in it, but as far as procedures, we were told very clearly what the procedure is, and I'd suggest we follow it.
And I don't think we were not following it. I think he was doing that as as part of the committee. We were specifically asked, and if you watch the video, they listed the stakeholders as part of our charge.
No, agreed. But again, what Susan suggested in her letter was that those requests should go through the town manager, not for us to go individually.
Well, in Paul's letter, he said, how do you want to communicate? Let me know.
well, that's correct.
Ruth, go ahead.
I have a word or six to share. I'm not sure what the squeakiness is here. I've had a follow-up conversation with Susan about the letter. I think we did, we understood each other. I think that I can sort of rebut a bit of Claude's position in a couple of ways. One of which is, we're in the middle of, one would think, to be well behaved, we would go to the town manager, who isn't here. So it's a little difficult to refer us to the town manager if there is, a difficulty getting access. Number two, the way the charge is written, it speaks to the stakeholders and assumes that we will contact stakeholders, one of which is HR. And then at the very, very end of the charge, it says resources will include human rights director, personnel board chair, town manager, and other staff. So it's difficult to say, on the one hand, they're recommending that we approach these people to gather the data that we need. And on the other hand, saying, but wait a minute, you didn't do it right. And I think, Paul has put in a good bit of time. I think he's made himself available, and I'm concerned that we don't seem to be working well together. And Susan has continued to do some work trying to finesse to see if she can work on the language of the charge, but it hasn't quite come to fruition yet. And, until it does, we're struggling on, and I'm trying to think that we're going to work together as best that we can.
Yeah,
Agreed,
this-
but I
this
think to anybody, Bruce, why don't you go ahead?
I would agree with Paul. I would agree with Ruth. I mean, is there somewhere in writing that this is official policy of the town? That everything gets approved by the town manager? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. We've got a committee, we've got a charge, and, if they haven't responded to Paul in 4 weeks for simple information, something's wrong here. And I would launch a public information request. I mean, somebody needs to help us, not block us, and I see us being blocked.
Okay, again, I think we're going down a interesting path. We were told in a very clear letter from a sitting select board member that the process, we certainly have stakeholders that we want to get information from, but then there's a process as to how we do it. I mean, I remember on the finance committee, there's a lot of information we needed. We were not individually allowed to go and seek that information. It had to go through the chair, and the chair then went through whatever mechanism that the chair went through, whether it's through the town manager and so on. If there's not a town manager, there's an assistant town manager or an acting town manager. I don't think, again, with 65 committees all have mandates that are important. I don't know that ours is any more or less important than any other committee. And if we are told from a sitting select board member that there's a process, I think it's probably a reasonable idea to follow that process.
Okay. All right, let's move on.
How
Anybody
did we
else?
leave, how did we leave this though? So I don't recall, I've never seen a letter from Susan. And it's probably my fault that I haven't read something that got sent out. All I'm operating on is from meeting 1 to meeting 2 to meeting 3, that we were all in agreement to submit some questions. They're pretty basic. I'm sorry, they're just not, we're not talking about hours of work here. This is a request that I put through the chair, and she put a couple of her own questions in, and they were sent out. This is a new process to me. If we have to do a new process, then we've lost a month, but I guess we've lost a month.
Yes, Terry.
If I may, I just want to answer the question of how do we move on? The select board will be taking up this issue again a week from today. We will probably be changing the charge to try to clarify how we think this committee and every committee should be operating so that it's clear and it's not confusing. And I want to really apologize because we were supposed to do that a week ago and we could not hear. I think Susan was on Zoom and she could hear. All the 4 of us that were sitting in that hearing room, we could not hear Ann, we could not hear Paul. I was so confused by the end of that meeting. We're just going to do it all over again with good sound quality next Monday and try to sort through this. So I'm sorry that it's taking a while and I hope that we get that clarity next Monday.
Could I ask a follow-up question of Terry? Insofar as we are where we are, the request came from this committee and Paul followed up with the request to the HR director. We now have a situation where it's well known that we've asked and we need a response. Are we going to submit another request? Or is, in some way, can HR make the information? I know it's busy, there's, all kinds of things going on, but it would help clarify things if I knew what happens next?
I don't think I'm the one to answer that because first of all, I don't know what the request is. I don't have a copy of it. Maybe Amy can say if the problem is that there's one specific thing on that request, it's going to take hours and hours, or whether there's a confidentiality issue, or I really have no idea what the problem is.
Maybe Paul can state the questions that were asked.
I can. Bear with me. I hope I don't cut myself off here. I'm technologically. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we're good.
Okay. Okay. Gonna have to do this. Excuse me one second. I'll get a hard copy.
I understand we're doing this in the course of a time period when everybody is already busy. You know, it's not our intention to make work.
No, and then I think as I'm trying to find this, if I could just respond to, I sent a message, Amy's seeing this. I sent, is this an okay process for us to ask questions? And the response was yes. I wasn't redirected to, it has to go through the town manager's office or through somebody else. It was just, you know, an inquiry. And now it's not okay to do it, but I don't know how to get rid of, I'm technologically illiterate here, folks, so.
Are you looking for the questions, Paul?
Yes.
Oh, I think I have a copy of them.
Wait a minute. Woolworths is backwards.
May I suggest that we just email the questions rather than take up time at your meeting? I didn't mean to go down a whole rabbit hole about this, but Ruth was asking me, and I just don't have enough information. So maybe the email would be faster.
And so what information would you like?
She wants to know the questions that Paul has asked
Okay.
about the last decade.
Right, and I guess I'd like to also hear from Amy why there's a problem. Is it just there's 65 committees and she's so busy? Are there confidentiality issues, or it can go through the town manager? Or I guess I don't really understand what the problem is.
Something I've recognized here. Would you like me to
Go ahead,
comment?
Amy. Do you want to respond? Go ahead.
I would love to respond. Thank you. So I think there's been a series of communication issues that have happened here. Yes, I did receive the questions from Paul, and I did tell him, yes, go ahead and send them here to HR and to me. I did provide him with one quick response of a document that I had readily available right away, which had to do with counts. It wasn't, unfortunately, something that had all the details and explained everything. So, but it was my quickest thing to give him for one of them. And I advised him that at that particular period, I was pretty out straight and had some other commitments that I had made to the personnel board and employees. And so I wouldn't be able to get something for that next meeting. And then I did send him an email that said that I had been able to shift my attention there. And I asked to meet with 2 members of the task force to discuss the data that was available and how it could be compiled, excuse me, and presented in a way that would be helpful for the group. So I don't have, it sounds like there's just documents that are ready to send out, and that's not it. It would take some some preparation, and I'd like to ask a few questions to make sure that I give you an adequate picture of what it is that you're asking for. And that's what I said in my response. And I did get, and again, I asked to meet with a couple members to explain it. And then I got an email saying, know that you might want to meet with me after you get the data. Then some things happened with the communication that I think may have led to the email that Susan Bates sent. This is my perspective, is as a town employee, while I didn't mind receiving the response here, my understanding is that I do need to check in with the town manager when I'm being asked to prepare data that doesn't already exist in a particular form. And that's where the conversations came up about the task force charge and what information was requested, and whether the town manager wanted me to shift my attention over to the things that were requested. And so I think that's what led to Susan's email, was the town manager would like the request to go through him. One way or another, I can bring them as well, but so that he can assess where the staff time is spent. So I still remain open to the ideas of meeting with members of the task force to find out more about the requests, or I need to do that at the town manager's discretion, but I'd like to find out more so we can prepare the data and determine whether there are any concerns with it and what exists and how I can present it in a way that's helpful to you.
Thank you,
I
Amy.
have the questions in front of me if anybody.
Yes. Why
Yeah.
don't you run through them, Paul?
Yeah, run through them.
Okay. Number one, Susan Bates mentioned some survey work you did. Could you please share with us? Have any studies been done by the town or a third party on the overall structure of the municipal employees, including the number of FTEs per department, and/or any studies that make relevant comparisons to similar size Massachusetts municipalities? If so, please forward. Number two, what are your thoughts about the 2030 vision that is now circulating? Number three, what was the role of the personnel board in creating new positions? Number four, what were the FTEs, full-time employees, part-time employees, and seasonal employees numbers for 2010? And how did that change or not change in 2021? And what was the rate of turnover for those years? Number five was the number of current vacancies, both advertised and pending. And number six, what do you think we should be asking for that we have not? Those are the questions.
So Paul, what I heard was Terry asking for a copy of that. Is that right,
Absolutely.
Terry?
Yes.
Okay. Would you send that to her? And it's, I think everybody on the select board is T Ackerman at, what is it, Concord.gov?
Right. Or if you send it to Susan, again, Susan can forward it to me. I'll make sure all the board members have it. It does sound like these questions are going to take some work on Amy's part. So I can understand, especially, if you have to look up 2010 and write out the turnover rate for all the different groups. And, I can understand there's a lot of detail. Maybe Amy is correct that if you meet, you can find a way that Amy can answer you without a lot of work on her part that would answer your questions, if that makes some sense.
Mhm.
Okay, just to throw in there, so that the select board gets the correct idea, each of us are developing questions, so you shouldn't have the idea that these questions have been voted on as extremely important by this task force. This is, perhaps a few people getting together and coming up with some excellent questions, but this is not the mission as we see it. We haven't voted on this. And
Yes,
another
we
thing
did.
I would say,
Actually,
is
we
having-
did.
We
We
did.
did.
Yes,
we
We
voted
did.
on, we
Yes,
voted
we
on
did.
all of those.
yes.
Yes, we did.
Okay, all of those for Paul to ask of the HR director, is that,
Yeah.
okay,
Yep.
great,
That's
Yes.
why I submitted mine.
okay.
So I sent a request to
You can change
HR
them.
asking, is this an okay process of doing it? And got a response that it's fine.
Okay,
And
you know, I guess what's making me a little bit uncomfortable is we're coming into an issue that was discussed at the select board meeting, and having watched the video, it seems that the select board was effectively at a consensus, but was giving us the opportunity to respond. And we obviously want to talk about that if we're comfortable with the charge that they came up with, for us to narrow the charge to what a number of us said we thought it was when we joined this board, was to look at the role of the personnel board and not to look at personnel policies. And I'm concerned that not only those questions, but a lot of other questions, a lot of emails that are going back and forth about the role of personnel policies in the 21st century and so on. And what makes me uncomfortable, and having reflected on it a little bit since last week, is, you know, I don't know that any of us have the expertise. I mean, I certainly respect citizen groups in the town of Concord. I think, you know, a bunch of smart citizens get together, you could ask some clever questions. But if we were asked to look at the policies of the police department or the fire department or the IT department, or in this case, the HR department, are we really the right group to do that? And I would say the answer is no. And having served on the personnel board for 6 years, I know that I don't have a personnel certification. I've never worked in personnel. I know enough that I know that it's very complex. And I don't think it's any more or less complex than any of those other departments. I think if we really wanted to look at the direction of personnel policies, that's probably, you know, something for a consultant to do. So I'm very comfortable where the select board looks like they're ending up, which is for us to focus on the role of the personnel board as opposed to personnel policies.
That is absolutely what we agreed to. And so I don't think there's any disagreement on that.
I'm just
But-
Claude,
but-
respectfully,
But
who
at
is
the
it-
same
who is
time,
ask-
wait a minute. But at the same time, we need to know what they are.
Correct, I agree.
Go ahead, Paul.
who is asking us to look over all of the personnel policies? I don't recall, in the charge, I don't see that. I don't, even anecdotally, I don't see anybody that's ever said our role is to review the personnel policies. It's to obviously.
We never
look at-
said it. We
Yeah,
never said that.
we never
Never
said
said
that.
it. So
Well,
what- I'm not sure what the problem is.
Okay, all right. Well,
Because the charge said it.
If we agree,
Wait
you
a
know,
minute, wait a
Yep.
minute. One person at a time. Ruth?
The charge, surprisingly enough, said that we would. And it was only after we got hip deep in this that we read the charge again and again and again and settled on our duty and responsibility is related town personnel policies. Now, the town gave us, as background documents, gave us the personnel bylaw, gave us the personnel policies, gave us this charge. We have to assume that we're going to make use of it. And eventually, I would hope we will focus on what we're trying to do here. I think we need a goal. And if the goal is to come out of the recent Board of Selectmen's meeting, the goal is to focus on a future personnel board, highly functioning personnel board. That's our goal. We want to look at what we can do, and that's not to memorize the 20 or more, maybe Amy help here, how many PPPs there are. And I don't think we intend to look at those, but we intend to look at the bylaws. At least I assume we're looking at the bylaw. Help, Susan, what do you say?
I was just actually what you said, that the original charge said updates to the personnel bylaw and related town personnel policies governing the town's non-unionized employees. And the recommendation that we pretty much settled on at our last select board meeting was that it would be revised to say, this is D1, if you're looking on your charge, make recommendations to the select board on updates to the personnel bylaw and the future role of the personnel board. instead of putting policies, wasn't to say you can't look at policy and procedure, but is to say the front and center is review the bylaw and recommend the future of the personnel board.
That's good. That's good. It's nice and neat and tidy. It doesn't change what happens with this one issue that's on the table, but it gives us some focus. And at some time in this process, we have to settle on goals. And, you know, maybe that duty and responsibility is our goal. Maybe
So
it should,
could we perhaps, I'd ask the chairs if we could perhaps take a quick vote. The select board very clearly asked us for a response on that charge.
did they?
No,
Yeah.
they didn't.
No,
Yes, they did.
Oh, they did. They asked us to weigh in.
Yeah, to weigh in. And I think in order to weigh in, we have to vote, unless you're happy to get a sense of the meeting that everyone agrees with that revision. I certainly do. I agree with that revision.
haven't seen a revision.
The one
It's
that
just what
Susan just read.
to us.
Susan just
Ah.
read it.
Okay, but I haven't seen it in writing.
They
Right,
haven't
it's-
voted on it yet.
Yeah, it hasn't been voted on.
And
by the
it
select
hasn't been
board.
voted on.
Okay, having watched the meeting, before they voted, out of respect for us and our committee, they were asking if there was a response. They asked Ann and they couldn't hear Ann. And you responded and said you weren't comfortable speaking for the whole committee.
That is correct.
So I think the only way that you could get comfortable speaking to the whole committee is if we discuss it right now, or we vote on it right now. The select board is asking us to give our thoughts before they vote, which was very nice and respectful of them.
This is Bruce. Can I make a motion that we vote to support the charge as is and as was given to us when we joined the board?
Do I hear a second?
second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Nay. Okay,
And
so
the ayes have it.
that's where the ayes have it. And so we'll hear from the select board. Not now, not putting you on the spot, but the select board will, take that into mind.
So I'm assuming, Claude, that what will happen is they will meet again, they will review the situation and vote to amend or not. We will move forward under their guidance. And I'm fine, however that works out, because we were already focused on the bylaw, not the policies.
Right.
But I continue to wonder in that context, how does that affect the search for information that we are in? We have asked for data. Does anything in the charge change as far as that goes? The questions are on the table.
I don't think the questions change, but it sounds like the process has to change. What I'm hearing is that we're supposed to go through the town manager, which is kind of getting a little bit iffy. So,
Well put.
so I guess until somebody is announced as acting town manager, we're on our own.
And for the most part, we're not approaching staff.
Right.
We're approaching boards and committees, and this policy that Susan brought to our attention doesn't really
No,
reference how we get information from boards and committees other than ask.
and we've gotten very good cooperation, so.
Yeah,
And I think the other resource that we're using is the statewide resources, which we have gotten some good information from.
this is good. This is good.
Paul,
okay, if we have to regroup and go back through, but I'm still lost as to a couple of the questions. We're not talking about 5 minutes
no,
of time being spent. documents either exist or they don't. If there are studies or comparisons done by other, that have been done, I'm led to believe by looking at the bylaws that these comparisons are supposed to be done every 3 years by the personnel board or less, at the most every 3 years. We're just looking for a copy of it. And if if something's going to take some time, I'm okay. Just let us know. It's
Yeah.
going to take a little time.
Right.
Anyway, that's.
So you're on the horns of a dilemma, Paul, because the public information request is for data documents that exists. You
Correct.
can't insist that somebody create it for you. So if, we've asked for information of HR, you've reiterated the fact that it's supposed to be generated on a certain cycle. We can have that information, but we cannot ask HR to create a new document for us. That's with, outside of,
Outside the purview.
I agree.
yes, purview, good word.
So I'm sorry to keep. I'm not trying to harp on this.
No.
What am I doing here now with this?
I would ask for a revisit to Amy about what she can put her hands on and what she cannot.
That sounds very reasonable.
I think that's very reasonable.
Sure.
And if she knows it exists, but someplace else, if she could point us there, that would be great.
But are we
Okay, let's
violating
go.
that we're not going through the town manager? What seems simple in the beginning now seems to be this complicated process.
Well, I keep going back to the fact that HR was asked, we were chartered with that as one of the stakeholders. We're just trying to do what we were asked to do. And I don't know how else to do it. And I
Right.
can't do it all. Each of the task force members has to help out with some of the work. So I don't know what the answer is.
Could we find a citizen volunteer to help doing the digging to find stuff?
What are
Beautiful.
we?
What?
We're it.
No, I don't know why you could. I don't know why we couldn't get someone to assist that volunteers to dig up the information.
Oh,
wonderful.
yeah.
And
Well,
my first
that's-
pick, my first pick would be Anita Techley if she could do it.
Yeah. Terry, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that Ruth put it beautifully in the questions, Paul, that you read off, and I tried to take some good notes. I think some of those questions refer to studies and documents that exist. And in that case, Amy might be able to find them quickly, or maybe it will take her some time. But there were some of your questions, I think, that would require her to create new documents. There was some analysis, comparisons of different studies, thoughts on the 2030 vision. Those kinds of things are not, I don't think, documents that already exist. I don't want to speak for Amy, but I'm guessing this is the stuff that's going to take her a while to create these new documents. So I would again urge you to sit down with Amy and see what she can do for you, and also for the committee to think through these questions. Do they relate to the role of the personnel board?
Yes, they do.
We
Yeah,
all
that's-
felt they did.
Yeah.
That's why
Okay,
we
well-
voted on them. Yes.
Well, okay, well, that's what you need to think through. So if you've already decided, okay. And finally, I want to ask if some or all of you can attend on the 20th, even by Zoom. And we will try to have a dialogue between the select board and your committee. And we can share the screen and show the questions and show the charge. Because the part that Susan is talking about, we can show it in writing very clearly. And maybe we can that way come to some agreement. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I will certainly try to be there.
We would have to post, Dan.
Yeah,
Remind me.
okay. So what else? Bruce, there was something you had also done this last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I spent some time with Carmen Reese, and she didn't really want to talk about the personnel stuff because she said she really didn't know enough about it too, which I thought was interesting. But we talked a whole lot about government and this, that, and the other thing. And she sent me to a, what is it, MMC, Mass Mutual Association website that provides all sort of details on, you know, personnel law and that sort of thing, and how you should run a human resources department, which I haven't looked at because I wasn't sure that we're supposed to be doing that, but I will. And she said she's glad to talk anytime. But she didn't really want to get into the questions on HR and retaining people because she said she wasn't qualified.
So I think one of the documents that did make it was the list of questions that I had drafted and had asked you to review. And we made one change in one of the questions. And those are I'm going to use for the interviews that I have set up with the members of the personnel board. And if they don't have answers, that's fine. It's kind of like, these are questions and some of them are more relevant than others, and it's a place to start. And so now, go ahead, Ruth.
I'm sorry. Claude has some experience having served on this board for 6 years. I don't want to put him on the spot, but if you looked at those generic questions, Paul, are there things that we're missing or we shouldn't be asking? I'm not Paul. Cover my face. Claude.
Well, yeah, I mean, let me just talk generally rather than specifically. And I thought it was interesting, Carmen Reese's answer to Bruce, that she didn't feel that she felt qualified to answer specific questions on retaining people and personnel policies. And I feel exactly the same way, despite having served on the personnel board for 6 years. And again, I bring it back to, saying, would I feel comfortable being on a committee that looked at police department, fire department, IT department policies? I really like the idea, and I know the vote went the other way, but I like the idea of the way the select board was going, which was to focus us on the role of the personnel board. Of course, we have to look at policies and what exists, but where I think we need to look at a line is, suggesting changing those policies. And when we start, sending emails around to the board, to the committee about 21st century hiring and, and new ways to do it, or I think we're going over the line. And so I just think going forward, we obviously need to have the select board decide on what our actual task is. And if that gets clarified, terrific.
I feel like I'm hogging the meeting, but I don't want either Bruce or Carmen to feel that we're scolding them because they were asked, the question, the charge says, ask the moderator. So we did. We can check that off. That's good. And I think the moderator was included. I'm not Susan here. I'm not Terry. I don't know. But it seemed to me that the moderator is probably included because this all came out of warrant articles and she would have experience there. Sorry.
Yeah, no criticism intended. I mean, obviously, we're struggling and the select board are struggling with our specific focus. And we obviously want to get that right before we go much further.
Yeah. Could we go to the rest of us and our questions that we were supposed to gin up for our board? I'm not our board, our stakeholder. I don't know if other people have done theirs, but my stakeholder is the select board. And I came up with a couple of questions, and I would like your insight into whether they're inappropriate, need to be changed, or missed the mark completely.
Okay,
And it sounds like you didn't get my document. So if you would be patient, I would like to state the question and see if there's a response. Number one, how does the select board interact with the personnel board? That's pretty open-ended. I'll have to listen to whatever they tell me. Number two, how may that have changed over your tenure on the select board? Again, I don't know how they're going to answer. Might have one or two words, might have, a whole tome. Number three, are you aware of any changes that would benefit the select board in its relations with employees? And then what improvements and or changes could strengthen the town relationship, the citizens, town relationship with employees? And finally, regardless of your own personal vote on Articles 6 and or 7, what was the telling argument on those articles? And what research that you might have done or been aware of influenced your opinion of the article?
anybody have any comments on those questions?
Nope. Sounds good.
I'm sorry that it wasn't multiple choice or anything like that. I just,
I
need-
like the open-ended one.
And I would think sometime soon, maybe at the end of this meeting or the next, we at least have to be charged to go meet with these folk.
Yeah.
Because we're holding the process hostage until we get it all done.
Yeah, I really kind of laid out in my email for setting up the interviews, how I was going to go about collecting the information from each of them individually and then aggregate it. And then go back to the three that I interview, and hopefully they'll recognize their answers in there, and it won't sound foreign to them. And then I'll bring it to the task force. And I'm thinking that there's going to be some good insights in there.
Well, personnel board, I think, will give us the best. Because here they are operating under the charter of the town.
Yep.
They're going to have an opinion.
Yep.
I can see it when you talk about it.
Oh,
Point of clarification, I'm just trying to understand, we've each been given certain stakeholders to talk to, but it's just sort of a small group of a larger group. I don't know why, the police department is any more or less important, and I know it isn't, any more or less important than CMLP or the DPW, CPW, sorry. I don't know how we branch out. I think the personnel board is a huge thing. I think the select board is a great stakeholder in all of this. But if we're not going individually to each of the departments, and I'm not sure we want to at this point until we've formulated some other questions. And that was the point of the data was, I'm more comfortable asking, I have some general questions I could ask the police chief as to, hiring cops now is a huge thing. It's a very large issue, but I'm not sure that's germane to the what we're trying to do. So I get some of the stakeholders, but I don't know what I'd ask the police chief or anybody in the police department. Or even HR at this point, quite frankly, is apparently there's some issue there, so I'm not sure. I think those are great questions. You had Ruth though for the on your end. I'm not sure what to ask until I have the data and that's why
I agree with you, Paul, but I think we're getting close to, we have a few major stakeholders, but we need to gather information from as broad a swath of people and categories as we can until we have some information, some data, as you say, under our belt. It would be difficult to just talk to people randomly. You know, we have employees who will be able to tell us things. We have retirees. We have residents of the town who've lived here, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Everybody is going to have a story, and it could be a valuable piece of information, but we need a context to start the conversation. I don't think I can just walk down the street, find a lineman and say, hey, what's up?
I agree. I agree with you. I'm not verbalizing it well enough, but I agree with you 100%. But I'm not sure I'm ready to go ask the police chief yet any questions.
Just as we were leaving tonight.
Well, then that can come later.
That I think. And I think in terms of, like, if I may, Amy offered that she wanted to speak to us. Maybe that should be a group thing. I mean, that's a huge part. That's a huge piece of the approach to the personnel board. So I believe we should take her up on it at some point when we receive more information.
The people who come to this event anyway.
Yeah, many of them are, but I'll be happy to reach out.
It would be valuable, I think, if we can all engage and share the same interpretation of what is being said.
Doesn't apply to what we're doing here, but.
I'll do whatever you want. Do you want me to go speak to HR on the police with questions, or do we?
Well, I think we stick with what the purview of the personnel board is.
I'm sorry, I don't understand, Dan.
I think we keep it within the context of what the personnel board has responsibility for.
Oh, union versus non. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the other questions I had for Claude specifically, because you were supposed to come up with some interview questions to talk to the moderator about.
No, he's the town manager.
Oh, excuse me, town manager. I don't know what we do at this point around getting input from the town manager.
Yeah,
My first thought would be to see if he's still coming in. If he is, go talk to him. See what you learn. Just my thought.
What about you, Claude? What was your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, I could try to talk to him, and I could also perhaps try to set up with the assistant town manager as well. I mean, Kate has been quite nice coming to our meetings, twice in a row. So as deputy town manager, I think that would, perhaps get us some of the way there as well.
Yeah, have you got your questions?
No, not yet. I actually, I really feel that I want to hear from the select board first to find out specifically if our charge is going to stay the way it is or if it's going to change. Because if it was going to narrow, I would probably focus a lot more on the personnel board and information they could get on a regular basis that they may or may not be getting now. And so I'd really want to focus on that. Also looking at the personnel bylaw, I'd want to discuss with this group, what types of changes, for example, just to jump into it, if that's all right. The personnel board is mentioned in a few places in the personnel bylaw. And, for example, it says the personnel board should meet regularly as necessary to consider such business as may be presented by town officials, town employees, and others. And that is clearly a very reactive role. And so I think we'd want to, make sure, is that appropriate? Should there be, things that the personnel board should be doing, proactively to bring them to the attention of, town manager, town employees, and so on. And then where, we've talked quite a bit about the grievance process and that's part of a statute. That actually isn't referenced in the personnel bylaw. It's obviously a part of it, whatever statute that allows that to occur, so it's not being questioned. But where it talks about employees, it says employees shall be provided an opportunity to review and comment on any proposed personnel policy that could have a significant impact on the conditions of their employment. So that makes it very clear that employees should be able to be aware of any changes. So, I'd like to know, to what extent that's happened in the past. Was it different 15 years ago, 10 years ago, recently? Are there ways that we could perhaps make that better without necessarily changing the bylaw, but just, making sure we're really following that well, so that employees feel like they really have a voice, which seems to be something that there's consensus on this committee that seems to be very important. So again, I'd want to start with the personnel bylaw where it is, get clarification from the select board as to precisely our mission, and then go from there. So I don't expect to have a meeting until after the 20th.
Your insights were very valuable, Claude. I really appreciate that. It's the kind of, you have the knowledge and you're ready to dig in, and that will benefit us all. And then it will benefit the town. Thank you.
Deals now. Save $20 when you spend $100 on select toys.
All right, new business. Is there any new business other than trying to get some of the logistics worked out? The other thing I wanted to bring up, goodness gracious, whoever's on, would they please mute? January 3rd, Ruth and I were thinking it would be good for us to meet in person, if at all possible. Some of us have not met each other than on this virtual realm here. And I'm wondering whether or not you'd be interested in meeting in person. And Ruth, I think you actually talked to somebody about that.
I did. Chris Carmody, who supports the town manager, has some responsibility for scheduling live and hybrid events. And he looked into the possibility of us meeting live on January 3rd. He provisionally reserved the first floor conference room at 141 Kais, keeping it very much in town center, good parking and so forth. If we decide not to take advantage of it, I will follow up with Chris and cancel.
All right.
But it is available. There is a little bit of training involved in push and go on the Zoom machine. But hopefully,
do we have to do Zoom, or could we do it all just live?
that's a Susan Terry question. Certainly, your experience with the Board of Selectmen was Zoom hybrid. So I don't know if if the board has taken a position about totally live or not. Susan, do you have an opinion?
No, we haven't. The governor is allowed hybrid till April.
Okay.
But I think as long as the meeting is posted, accessible, open, that it can be, Terry, jump in if I'm misstating this, it can be just a live meeting. I mean, that's what we did before.
I would keep it simple.
Yes. Well, first of all, we have to determine if the committee is open to it. If the
What
committee
say
is,
the rest of you?
I would vote for a live meeting.
Sure. I think I'd prefer to meet in person.
I just thought it'd
Well,
be
if you're
for us
having
to
a
do it earlier on rather than later. So
Okay.
what do you feel about hybrid versus just a live meeting without the virtual?
I think hybrid might be respectful of any citizens that want to join us that maybe can't, given that there's flus and, coughing going around. So
I think if there is a benefit to COVID, it has been the additional people engaged safely from home in local government. And, it will be hard to lose that.
Yeah.
But live meetings are valuable.
So,
So in the meantime, we have a meeting scheduled on December 20th.
yep,
And I will also post for the selectmen's meeting
okay.
on
So-
December 20th.
So December 20th, maybe we just ought to make this meeting the selectmen's meeting.
Where's the fun in that? We have to do minutes. Come on.
Want 5 straight hours on the computer?
Okay. Oh, I see Mark's hand up. And
Mark, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to make a comment, and I think it mostly goes to the last discussion you were having. I think at least some of the stakeholders, in particular the personnel board, and likely the select board, should be asked what they think the personnel bylaw ought to contain. Because that, if we think about the history of how we really ended up where we are now, it's because there was an effort that was put forward to completely replace the personnel bylaw. And I think there are quite a few of us, including actually members of the personnel board, who stated in public meetings, and I think even the town manager stated in a public meeting, that this was only a partial replacement. This was basically removing the old personnel bylaw without saying what was going to be the contents of the new personnel bylaw. And while you're asking people who have experience in this area, I think that is the reason for this task force, is to contemplate a proposed replacement for the personnel bylaw, and I would focus on that. I'd also suggest that there, the class of prior select board members, the people who have served in the town manager's role, in particular, there's something to be said for asking people that have long tenures in those positions to weigh in, maybe even prior moderators, if we're worried about what can go into a bylaw and what can't go into a bylaw. So that I generally agree with the idea that this task force responsibility is really about helping to define for the personnel board what the personnel board is supposed to be up to, what it does as a delegate from the town charter, and what its purviews are, and that is a governance question. Ultimately, it does not really demand a lot of specific domain expertise around, hiring or IT policies, or heaven forbid, policing. Those are, that's the analogy I use is zoning, for example. When we zone the town, we create business areas, we create residential areas at a very high level. And then we rely on staff and domain experts to just define what exactly can you do in a business district? What exactly are the boundaries of the business district? And there's a governance process for changing those rules as we need to. Maybe we, add a lot to the historic district and town meeting has to do that. Those are the things that belong in a bylaw because they're sort of establishing how the overall process of governance is taking place. And so, if I were asking, even the HR director and others questions about in this area, I would be asking them questions that ask for their opinion about how these things should be done in a perfect world and whether there's a bylaw that could be crafted to do those things. Thanks for listening to my comment.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Paul.
Just one last question, if I may. Getting back to process. One of the questions I do have relates directly to the personnel bylaw in the periodic review of compensation. That was something I was going to ask the personnel board for, or I was going to suggest that we ask the personnel board for. It's in the bylaws, so we're within the four corners of the document. Item 6.3. It shall be a responsibility of the personnel board to review rates of pay at least every 3 years. Whenever the personnel board reviews the compensation plan, it shall take into account and give such weight, blah, blah, blah. It gives the things that they want to. I think it would help me personally to get a copy of those periodic reviews that have been submitted to them, just assuming they've been submitted to them, if they have them in their custody. It's in the bylaw, and if not, where is it? And could we get a copy of it? I don't want to start another war by just asking for a copy of something. That's my question.
Could I ask Claude, in a period of the compensation plan review and update, is that information posted on the personnel board page during discussion or then comes down, or where does it live?
So thinking back, and excuse me if my memory's faulty, if Amy wants to jump in and correct me, it actually is looked at quite a bit more often than 3 years. It's looked at every year when the town proposes the compensation plan through the personnel board that's going to go before town meeting. Now, is there a report that's generated? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly minuted. It's certainly the document with the compensation plan is there at the beginning of the meeting. It's discussed during the meeting, but is there an actual document that says here are the full comments on it? My recollection is that we focused on the changes. We focused on the issues that came up. It's like, okay, because of the dynamics of this particular department, these changes went through because of the dynamics of the town's hiring overall. Here's the levels at which, hiring has changed. So it's a very rich discussion with the town manager and with the HR director, but I do not know that other than that, the minutes of the meeting and other than attending that meeting, if there's any kind of report that's generated. Certainly the results are voted on at town meeting. The compensation plan is presented. It usually goes through at the beginning of the meeting, if not separately. So it's certainly discussed and it's publicly released, but I don't know that there's a sort of, companion pamphlet that goes along with it and saying, here's the discussion of the changes and so on.
So there isn't a report?
No, I mean,
saying that.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I would say the discussion that the town manager and the HR director present to the personnel board, if to whatever extent that's on paper, that would be the record. And looking at the changes to the compensation plan before and after, as discussed at the personnel board, that would be there. But I do not know that there's a separate document that's produced that says, here's a review of it.
Okay, then that's, might be something that needs to be changed in the personnel bylaw. Because it specifically asks for certain things to be included in it. I'm not mocking it. Please don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that's what the document says, that a report will be, you know, or there'll be a periodic review. So I'm just, is it okay for me to ask?
Oh, of course. Of course. No, I mean, these are, you know, you're right on target with the sort of issues, and that's the kind of thing that I was bringing up as well. It really, to me, it seems to be in large part, a lot of what we've been talking about are reporting issues. That if we, you know, are going to continue with a personnel board, you know, what ways can there be better information that's available for the town, the personnel board, for citizens? You know, what interactions between the HR director and the personnel board, as you say, should perhaps be documented and memorialized better. What additional information, you know, should be there. So, I mean, I do think a lot of this, probably in the end, if I'm going to guess where we might be a year from now, I think a lot of it is going to be around reporting.
Okay,
Fair enough.
fair enough. Thanks, Mike.
So in terms of our next meeting, is everybody planning on coming to the select board meeting? And if so, do we want to just go to that rather than have a meeting of our own?
Could I back up and ask, do we have other issues to report at a meeting of the task force?
We'll have a little more information after our meeting with Ellen tomorrow. I'm not sure we have a whole hour's worth or hour and a half.
Hour and a half.
So maybe we could make it a short meeting, but it's still, you know, the selectmen meeting starts what, at 6:30, doesn't it, Susan? Yeah. So do you want to have a 5 to 5:30 meeting? Just
Okay with
touch
me.
base. And then whatever we get out, if they get off, we'll get off. All right, we'll keep our own personal meeting, and Ruth will also have to post for the 6:30.
Okay.
And this is the 6th?
This is at 5. Ours
No,
is,
but what date? I'm sorry.
oh, this is the 20th of December.
Okay.
At 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Oh, no, excuse me, 4. We're at 4, aren't we?
4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to 4:30,
And
whatever.
it's Zoom.
And it's Zoom. Now, how are people feeling about the 3rd? Everybody okay about meeting in person at the DPW?
I think it's a great idea personally.
Okay,
For the purposes of the minutes, should I list that as in person or hybrid?
hybrid.
Okay.
It sounds like that's what everybody was wanting.
In order to be respectful, I think that's a good one.
Yeah, okay.
And that will be at 141 Kais.
And that's at 4 o'clock.
Yep.
Yes, please. Do we have any members of the public still standing? Ready to make comment?
Anybody want? Terry?
Well, I just want to thank everyone. This is a very confusing task, and I appreciate everyone's patience and tolerance as we work through this. Hopefully, we will get some real closure next Monday. But thanks for everybody's time and patience with this.
You bet. Anita?
First, I want to apologize. Just as I was signing on to the meeting, I got a phone call from Susan's husband, actually. We had just hung up from another meeting. And I didn't realize I was not on mute as I left the room, or that my voice was loud enough. You evidently could hear me, so I apologize. And second, I guess I have a question. I retired in 2017, but had worked for the town over in 2 segments for 28 years under 3 town managers, not including the current town manager. And never in that time was there a policy that any requests that came to our office had to go through the town manager. And such a policy Susan has cited and Amy has mentioned, and I'm wondering, is that a new written policy, or, frankly, if someone came in, asked me to take on something that was not in my normal job description, or something that was really going to take an inordinate amount of time, yes, I would go through my supervisor and or the town manager. Often would send up to the town manager to do that, but that was rare. And I want to say, I could count on 2 hands the number of times that such a request would have been made. Routine requests, and about half of what Paul was requesting was routine, what I would say, and certainly is within the scope of the HR director, or HR department's knowledge or information available. And I'm wondering where this policy, if there is such a policy, or where it came from.
Susan, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I can. I can't answer you, Anita, about whether, what I'm aware of is in the last year, the demands on the staff time have accelerated, have increased, and people, including elected officials, who feel that it's fine to go directly to staff. And I've heard this from different department heads and from town manager and deputy town manager. So that was the advice, was that it go through the town manager, so that somebody is monitoring, because town staff generally, if you say, would you do this? They say yes, but there's only so many yeses they can give. And it seems to have, there's been a distinct uptick in what people, citizens, committee members, elected officials think they can ask of town staff. So in order to monitor it, that was the suggestion, but it's not, as far as I know, this isn't a written policy.
Okay. One other comment, and another committee that I attended a meeting, they had an in-person meeting a couple of weeks ago, is the DEI Commission, the new one. And this committee, I think, are fairly unique in that they don't come under any, they don't have a staff liaison. They have a select board liaison, but they don't comfortably fit under a staff person's bailiwick. And that may be the issue, that, because the information is not coming through a staff request, but it's coming through a committee request. So that might be something that the select board needs to revisit when they appoint a group that there is no staff assigned.
And there are a number of committees that do not have staff assigned to them, because there's a limit to the staff. So like the, I'm trying to think of some others, but yes, you're right. But there are some committees that have met for a long time and don't have a staff person as a resource and or a minute taker and or, a conduit. So, but that's kind of separate from the issue. That is definitely an issue, but it's separate from the issue of access to staff generally.
Well, it certainly is easier for a staff liaison to access information than it is for a volunteer committee person. You're right, it is. But the question is, we added 5 committees just this year, and there have been a number of committees. We're up to 65. There were 50, and
there isn't the staff capacity to staff each of those committees. It's unless we want to increase staff, which, you know, is a budgetary issue, and, you know, that's a whole other conversation. But there have been a number of task force, short and longer term committees like DEI, which is long-term, that have been formed, but there isn't we don't have the resources in the existing staff model to be able to staff every single one of those. That's kind of the current situation, and whether that changes remains to be seen.
Okay. Is there any other final comments that anybody wants to make? So Ruth, are you going to send out your questions for the selectmen to us so that we can see it in writing?
Sure, I can do that. I
Great.
might even add one.
Huh?
I might even add one.
Yeah.
I'm
okay.
just, when the issue came up right here this evening, I thought, shouldn't the personnel board be taking an interest in DEI? I'd be interesting to hear what the Board of Selectmen would think about that. Because, you know, it's DEI in the community and in the workforce.
Yeah. Great.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm
So-
sorry. you know,
Yeah.
I
Paul?
apologize. There was one other, now the first couple of meetings that we had, I brought up the issue of, or the possibility of at some point doing some sort of survey out to employees,
Mhm.
if we all recall.
Yep.
And I'm asking just as a willing to do it, that would involve money. And we're not there yet to even have any idea how much money to ask for. Does anybody have any problem if I do some research? And that would include asking the town how they go about, I understand the procurement process and procurement limits and all of these things. I did that for a living. I'd like to reach out to the town and ask them how they go about getting their people that do outside surveys and what it costs.
I would support that.
I would support it too. Great idea.
Just
And-
very simple.
and
I'm not
I-
looking,
And
I
I'll
wouldn't be
find
looking
out,
for,
and
I'm
I'll
sorry.
find out a little bit more about what was involved with the Collins Center tomorrow.
great. As long as everybody else is on the, I just want to be careful here that I'm going to ask the staff member of the town how they went about, what it costs to do specific surveys. I'm not looking for results of the survey. I would be looking for what did it cost to do, because the town does multiple surveys. So I think it would be helpful.
Ruth?
For clarification, Paul, we have a ton of cultural nonprofit-ish institutions and they survey. I wouldn't limit your question to how does the town survey? We might have access to, you know, how does the community chest survey? How does
Emerson Hospital,
yeah, how do they do it?
Concord,
I thought
Carlisle Community Chest just did a survey.
I thought I would start with the town
Yeah,
and ask, how did the light department, what process did they use to do the survey on smart meters?
yeah. Did
How
they use?
did, you know, just simple mechanical, who bid on it? So that we know, you know, if it falls between $10,000 and $50,000 of any town procurement, it has to be a process where there's a file on it. So it should be a really simple thing to answer of who, how did they reach out and what did they learn and what did it cost? And I'd start there. And I think that's a great idea as far as the other nonprofits.
It'd be interesting to know if we have to have our questions before we find the surveyor, or does the surveyor assist in developing appropriate questions. And, that's not something I'm familiar with.
Me either. So I thought I'd
I
start with
see
the
Kate.
simplest question.
Kate,
Kate has an opinion.
I don't, I mean, I do have an opinion, but what I'm sharing is that the town has 3 platforms that we have used on various times, including when the current town manager first began to survey the staff. And I will certainly ask the town manager for permission, but I don't think that he would have an issue with me speaking with Mr. McCone and at least showing you those 3 platforms. And I'm happy to do that either in person or if you want to do a Zoom with a screen share, whatever you're comfortable with, and see if they meet your needs, because they're free, in that the town has access to them. And I think depending on what you want to get from employees, as far as information, there's ways to do that without spending a great deal of money. I think just if you give me sort of, here's what I'm trying to gather, here's the information that I'm trying to gather, and from this demographic, we might be able to work together for something that
Right.
people will actually fill out too. Because I think if you make it difficult, people don't necessarily want to fill out the big convoluted surveys.
Yeah, no, I understand. I appreciate that comment very much. And I'm not even there yet. I'm asking permission. Can I contact John Harris?
Go,
Ask-
John,
and-
yeah.
And ask him when these surveys were done, can I get copies of who they used and what did it cost? That's all.
So you're
Just
talking
to
about
get
the citizen satisfaction surveys?
all of them in the last
Okay.
3 years.
So my office did the citizen satisfaction surveys with Erin Stevens, who's our public information officer. So you're welcome to talk to John about it, but I could actually just get you that if you want.
Okay, however you'd like it done. I'd like to get who bid on the individual
Yep.
to
I
do the
understand.
surveys. So we might be able to reach out to them to see what they do.
Bruce?
How do we want to do it? I'll do it through you.
The other question that would be interesting would be to see how many people were surveyed and what the results were in terms of responses, non-responses, or whatever. Not what's in them, but just the response rate and all that stuff.
Mhm.
That would be fascinating.
So how is this left? Is it okay if I contact John? Or do you want me to do it through you, Kate?
Either of us would be responsive. So whatever you're comfortable with, whatever the group wants to do.
Thank you.
Kate, while we have you here, I sent an email to the town manager asking for a quick little notice to go out to all employees about the existence of the task force. I have not gotten any kind of feedback about that. What would you
Okay.
suggest I do?
I'm happy to have a conversation with him tomorrow and ask him. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the email. I haven't seen it. But that I'm sure that it's there. And I think he's working on buttoning some things up. So if you like, I can try to touch base with him tomorrow and get his feedback on that, or simply ask him to forward it to me. I think the select board tonight is determining a succession plan, at least in the interim. And I think that's going to dictate who steps up in what degree. So I just I want to be respectful, obviously,
Yeah.
to
I
not
understand.
overstep.
I totally understand. I didn't know
But I'm
whether it was one.
Happy to ask him and
Okay.
can write to you and Ruth as the chairs and
Thanks.
at least give you the information.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I call this meeting to adjournment at this point, and I need the roll call. Ann, Rarick,
Ruth.
Second,
Oh.
and Bruce.
yes.
Great. see you next, the 20th.
The 20th, hopefully with flying documents. We'll work
Right.
very hard to get them out.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.